What is up, fitness freaks? Welcome back to the KFit show. My name is Kalan Anglos. I am the host, and I am a human performance expert and PhD candidate at the University of Victoria in the kinesiology program. What I do is I train as well as educate you on the science behind improving your sport performance and living a healthier lifestyle. The KFit show is all about how to properly train, how to properly do things in the gym, and how you can effectively train to improve your performance and improve your life in every way, every shape, every form. The proper ways to do it, the science behind it, and little tips and tricks along the way. Okay, so that's the KFit show in the nutshell. I'm your host again, Kalan Anglos. Thanks for tuning in, guys, and we're going to get started with the show. All right, welcome back to the show. This is the post-eclipse 2017 show. The solar eclipse happening, it was yesterday, Monday, August 21st. You know, I went outside and I looked at the eclipse, and now I'm blind. So I am bringing you this episode completely blind. That's the way she goes when you look at the eclipse and you don't listen to the old disclaimers. You know, the eclipse was what it was. It wasn't great. I didn't really look at it through a lens or nothing like that. So whatever, it is what it is. But it is kind of a cool experience to go through. But either way, we're back in studio for the KFit show. Thank you, everybody who's watching right now. I see you on Facebook Live. Thank you very much for tuning into this episode. Again, I'm going to keep these live shows going. If you have questions right now, send them my way throughout the show. I am going to answer one specific question at the end of the show in the Ask KFit section. But otherwise, I appreciate you guys watching, and I appreciate you guys following along on this journey. All right, today on the KFit show, we're going to talk a little bit about the basic principles to training. But before we get there, this weekend, August 26th, in case you've been living under a rock, is the biggest combat sports event and what I'm calling the biggest sporting event of all time. Yes, I'm talking about Conor McGregor versus Floyd Mayweather, the boxing fight that everybody's talking about. Everybody and their dog is going to be tuning into this boxing fight that comes up this week, and I'm excited for it. I know it's been, it's kind of going to be a little bit of a shit show, for lack of a better term. It's a spectacle for sure. I mean, you have a 40-year-old coming out of retired boxing, Floyd Mayweather, one of the best of all time, 49-0, going against Conor McGregor, one of the best pure martial artists right now and possibly of all time, but going to boxing for the first time professionally. He's done so as an amateur, but doing so for the first time professionally, I think he's going to have his hands full. I don't think it's going to be that great of a fight, to be honest, but I really hope it is. I thought the build-up was going to be a little bit more, to be honest. I thought there'd be a little bit more trash talking. They did their little world tour there a few weeks ago that kind of got everybody excited. But there hasn't really been much back and forth up to this point, and I don't really expect there will be much more leading up to the fight here this weekend. But either way, it's going to be a great fight. It's going to be a spectacle. I recommend, if you're a combat sports athlete, obviously, or a combat sports fan, I should say, you're obviously going to be watching this fight this weekend. But if you're not, I think you should also be tuning in, and you should also be looking at this fight because it's a spectacle. Like I said, it's one of the biggest events, one of the big sporting events of all time. And McGregor's got a puncher's chance. He's got some power. He's quick. He's longer. He's got more range. He could catch Mayweather. It probably won't happen. Mayweather's the best of all time at not getting hit, so that's why I don't think it's going to be a very good fight, but you never know. You got to watch, and the whole world's going to be watching, so looking forward to that. I'll break that down a little bit on next week's show of the KFit show. We'll talk a little bit about that fight as well. For myself, we got 2 weeks, and we're back teaching in lab again at the University of Victoria. School's almost started. Summer is almost over. Can you believe it? Over halfway through August already. This is August 23rd when this episode comes out. 22nd here as we're airing live. And summer's already almost over. It's ridiculous. It seemed to fly by. Hopefully you guys got to enjoy or get to enjoy your last couple weeks. I'll be working nice and hard, getting ready for the lab. Again, I'll be teaching both exercise physiology, which I've taught for the past 2 years, or physiology, and I will also be teaching for the first time this year exercise prescription. So I'm really excited about that as well, just to kind of use my knowledge that I've gained over the past few years, not only in my master's degree, but in my research and just my continued education. and I get to kind of teach it and help younger people kind of build up that. So that's coming down in a couple weeks as well. My schedule is going to be crazy, so if you're a client of mine, I apologize right now about maybe having to move you around a little bit in terms of our training and that kind of stuff, but I do appreciate all you guys that support me and go through. So 2 weeks until we're back at that, and we'll be going forward. My research as well is going to be kicking up in high gear here again. We got the beginning of season testing for all our karate athletes coming up here pretty soon in September. They're going to do the standardized fitness test that I established as part of my master's degree, so they're going to be doing that test. That test is used all across the country, even at the Karate Canada level, and we'll be doing that one at the beginning of season in September, and then again at the end of season later in February. So that's coming up. A lot of data collection there. I got the boxing athletes I'm going to get some data on. Really going to find out how physiologically, or what physiologically it takes to perform in boxing. Get some data to kind of support what might already be out there, what we already can kind of guess. And then judo athletes as well I'm going to be working with. So it's going to be busy, getting lots of data and doing that research and that school thing. So we're going to talk about that a little bit as we get going. But today, on today's episode of the KFit Show, like I said, we're looking at the basic training principles that you use when you train for any specific thing. Now, these are principles that have been put place by people before me. Obviously, I didn't make these up, but these are principles that if you follow correctly and you follow along, you will be able to improve your performance and you'll be able to get to your goals quicker, because these are just things that have been shown. There's evidence to support that you do them this way, this is how it works, you're going to get this kind of goal, or you're going to kind of get this outcome. So you follow these basic training principles in the gym, you follow them in your training, and you're going to see results. But there is certain things to consider in each of these. So I'm going to break down about, maybe 5 or 6 different training principles, the basic training principles to training in the gym or training for sport. There is all kinds of them out there. So you will see a whole bunch in the research, all in the literature. You'll see a bunch out there that I'm not going to speak about. So these are the most important ones that I think are important for training. And I'll explain what they are, how they relate to training, and how you can go about making sure you're doing it when you're training and when you're going through. Okay, so with that in mind, let's just dive right in. This is the basic training principles here on the KFit Show. All right, the number one training principle that I think is the most important that you need to consider when you're training is called the principle of specificity. Okay, the principle of specificity. What the principle of specificity states is that you're only going to see the adaptations that you're working on, that you're training. So what that means is that if you're a combat sport athlete, if you're, say, a judo athlete, you need to train in judo specifically to get the specific adaptations in your body to improve your judo performance. Okay, it makes sense. It's the same thing as if you're in the gym trying to improve your squat performance. You're only going to improve your squat performance if you're doing specific moves like the squat, or squat-like movements that specifically relate to the squat. So the principle of specificity basically states that you need to train in the specific ways that relate to what your goals are. So, maybe you don't know, and maybe that's why you go to a trainer. A lot of people go to the gym to get healthier, to lose weight, to drop their blood pressure, to get a lower resting heart rate, whatever it is. But there is specific ways to train to get to those goals, and that's still the principle of specificity. You need to train specifically in the right ways to get to the goals that you want. Now, again, you can go back and look at a bunch of stuff I've put out that might help answer, how you do some of this stuff, or you can just talk to somebody, talk to an exercise professional and see, well, what are the specific ways for me to improve whatever, my resting heart rate or my blood pressure or my heart rate variability or whatever it is. Go back and, kind of ask them how you can kind of do it, because there is specific ways to do it. So that's the principle of specificity. Make sure the way you're training is specific to your goals. And this is especially important for sport performance as well. If you're an athlete in a sport, you're only going to improve in that sport if you do that sport, right? All the skills about it. But also, when you're training in the gym or training on your own, maybe not necessarily sport-specific movements, you need to be training the specific muscles that are involved in your sport, and the specific energy systems in your sport, and in the specific planes of motion, and just mimic the way that they are done in the sport. The more specific you can get, the more likely you are to get results or to get improvements in that sport. So just make sure you're following the principle of specificity. For me, it's the number one training principle. Principle of specificity: train the way you want to improve. Okay? Next one of our basic training principles is the principle of progression. Okay? So the principle of progression just basically states that you need to progressively improve, right? It's not something that's going to happen right away. This might seem pretty straightforward, but it's an important training principle. We need to progressively keep putting more stress. Remember, exercise is a stress and working out is a stressor. We need to put more stress on our body in order to see those adaptations. So we need to progressively add more weight, or we need to progressively add more intensity or longer distances if you're trying to run far distance, or you're an endurance athlete or whatever. You need to progressively be adding to it. And this is especially why a periodization plan is specifically important, is because if you have a proper periodization plan and you're following it, that's what a periodization plan does. It progressively moves you from your beginning of season or your beginning of goal to the end of season or your end goal, and it progressively adds that, systematically adds whatever to get to your goal. So think about that. The principle of progression, you need to keep pushing it, because if you're not, you're just going to have a stalemate and you're just going to be the same. Which leads me to the next principle, which is the principle of the principle of overload. Now, this is sometimes called the principle of progressive overload. You see what I did there? Just put two of the training principles together, progressive overload. But the principle of overload is that same thing, where you need to be overloading your system past that which it's already done before, past that what it's used to. So, if you're just talking basic exercises in the gym, say we're talking your clean and jerk, a really good power movement for people that want to develop power, full body power and connect chain power, blah, blah, blah. If you're doing that type of move, the clean and jerk, you need to progressively overload. So you need to put more weight on. You need to either do it faster, you need to either do more reps, or you need to do more weight. You need to overload your body, because again, we know that you're only going to get the adaptations in your body. You're only going to get stronger, faster, whatever, if you overload. If you're staying at that same weight or that same rep range or that same distance, whatever it is, you're not going to see those adaptations. So you need to continually, progressively overload. So that's just two of the principles put together, principle of progressive overload. So think about that as well. Continually overloading the system progressively throughout a periodization plan or a long period of time. And that leads right into the next one as well, the principle of adaptation. Okay, the principle of adaptation, again, is that your body will only, it's similar to specificity, where your body will only adapt to the stress that it's put on it, right? So if you're exercising a specific way, your body is only going to adapt. The principle of adaptation, it's only going to adapt to the way you're training. You're not going to be able to improve your anaerobic performance if all you're doing, well, that's not true, is aerobic. Aerobic does help our anaerobic performance. So that's not necessarily true. Bad example. Cut that out. Don't worry. I'll get the producer to edit that part out. But what it basically means is if you want to get better at the bench press, you need to, your body isn't going to adapt to getting better at the bench press unless you're doing the bench press or unless you're doing squats. So the principle of adaptation is just that. It's only going to adapt to the way that you train it and following the other principles, the overload, the progression, the specificity. Those adaptations that happen in the body happen over a long period of time. And again, you have to follow all the other principles in order for them to happen. And the one that's especially important here for this is our next principle, called the principle of recovery. And this is my favorite one, because a lot of people get carried away with training and even they get overtrained to the sense that they're not recovering enough. What people need to understand is that it's not the work you do in the gym or in training that actually improves your performance. It's the recovery that improves your performance. It's the recovery from your training that is going to make your body adapt to the stress that you've already put on the body, to make sure that the next time you do that workout or the next time you exercise, you're going to perform better. And it's all about the recovery. I can't stress that enough. People get too carried away sometimes with training every day. I'm going to go to the gym every single day. Yeah, well, if you're not properly recovered, you're not going to improve, and you're not going to see those goals, and you're not going to reach those goals that you want to get to, because you haven't let your body recover. You have to let your body recover. Now, everybody always asks, well, how much do I need to recover? Well, that's something I can't specifically answer for you. You need to kind of look at what you're doing and how your body reacts to the training and to the exercise, and then base that off of how much you should be recovering. A couple ways to monitor your recovery. Obviously, we can look at your soreness level, your DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness. If you're not sore, it probably means you've recovered enough and that your body isn't really adapting too much anymore. You can also go on your general energy levels. If you've been training a lot and your energy is kind of low, it might indicate that, you're not properly recovered. However, the best way to monitor your recovery and if you're properly recovered for training is heart rate, and something that I've talked about before, heart rate variability. Okay, if you guys don't know exactly what it is, go back and look. I've put a lot of stuff out on heart rate variability. Basically what it is we're measuring your heart rate, and we're looking at the time between each beats and the difference between the time. I'm not going to get too technical in it right now, but what heart rate variability does is it'll actually tell you if you're overtrained. So people used to do this with resting heart rate, and you can still do it with resting heart rate. We used to say that if your resting heart rate increases more than 10%, you probably shouldn't be training at 100%. Maybe you should only be training at 85% or 90% or whatever it is. But heart rate variability will actually tell you, exactly where you should be training and exactly how much recovered you are, because you kind of get that baseline heart rate variability level. And then if it alters too much between that, directly that you're not fully recovered. So heart rate variability is one of the best ways. Go look at that if you're not familiar with it. Ask me about heart rate variability. I'm all about heart rate variability. I love that right now. And it's coming out. A lot of research is coming out heart rate variability, including some for myself. So that'll be coming down. So that's the principle of recovery. Make sure you're properly recovered. That's basically the roundabout what I just said. There you go. Recover. Finally, one more I'm going to give you is the principle of reversibility. Reversibility. What is that? Well, principle of reversibility is basically that if you don't train, if you stop training, or you stop training in a specific way, you stop working a specific muscle, it's going to go in reverse. It's going to revert back to where it was before, or sometimes even before. So you're going to lose maybe that muscle mass. If you're not training in a way to improve your muscle mass, it's going to reverse back. It's going to revert back to the way it was. So that's why you need to keep following these progressive overloads and the principle of specificity and the adaptation principle, all this kind of stuff, because if you don't, you're just going to, lose it. Use it or lose it, right? That's what they say about all kinds of stuff, but it's especially true also in training. You need to train specific ways, and if you don't, you're gonna lose it. So it's gonna reverse. So the principle of reversibility just states that if you don't, you're gonna lose it and it's gonna go away. So think about that. I know sometimes it's tough, especially in the summer months. A lot of people like to take the last 2 weeks of summer off. I understand that, and I think it's very important to make sure you're properly recovered and also take some time away. I think that's especially important if you're in your off season and you don't have anything coming up for your sport or whatever. But you need to still make sure that you're training. You need to make sure that you're staying on top of it and that you're not going backwards. We're all about going forward here on the KFit show, right? Make sure we're improving. Make sure we're going forward every single day or whatever. Don't forget, too, that you can do active recovery, right? Just because, you're not doing anything specifically doesn't mean that you're going to reverse. You can do lighter weight stuff just to maintain, right? There is a section in the periodization model that is just the maintenance phase, right? You're just maintaining where you've already got. So when we look at a periodization plan, look at the video that I'll be putting out later this week on periodization planning. We keep going up, getting harder. We go, from hypertrophy, muscle growth to strength, up to power. We're getting harder. And then as we get into our season, now we're just about maintaining. So we can do that too. We can maintain. So we're not necessarily going up. We're not necessarily reversing though, but we are kind of maintaining that same level and going through. So that is in the periodization plan, and it should be for anybody who uses it. And you should be using it. So there you go. Those are the training principles. Real quick, just to reiterate there, we got the principle of specificity. Make sure you're training specific to the way that your sport is performed. Principle of progression. Make sure it's progressively getting harder, progressively getting more intense. Principle of overload, which makes sure that you're overload. Make sure you're doing more than you did last time. Make sure you're going higher intensity, longer distance, more weight, whatever. Principle of adaptation. Make sure that you're training in a way that you want to get the adaptations. Your body's not going to adapt unless you put stress on it. Principle of recovery. Make sure you're properly recovered. So important. If not, you might be subject to the principle of reversibility, which is going backwards. There it is. Those are my basic training principles. I will post those also later so you guys can see it. You don't have to write these down or come back and listen to it or whatever. I will write those down for you guys so you can see it. But those are my basic training principles. Follow them. Make sure you know what they mean. Make sure, just kind of tick them off in your head. Be like, yep, I'm following that one. Yep, we're doing that. We're going through here, whatever it is. Make sure you're doing that, because if not, like I said, you're not going to improve or you're not going to get the performance goals that you want. There it is. is. All right. Moving on to the next section in the KFit show. This is something that we started the last couple weeks ago. It's called Sensei Says, and basically this is just me telling you to do something, and it could be sport related, it could be life related, it could be business related, whatever it is, but it all kind of relates to performance and how we go about that. So without further ado, here is our newest Sensei Says. So Sensei Says, dive on in. Okay, dive on in. What do I mean by that? Well, I've realized, especially lately, that for me, I'm the type of person that just likes to jump in the deep end and sink or swim, right? I like to just kind of go for it. And this was, kind of especially true in my academic world, but in my athletic world life too. When I was a competing athlete at the high level, I would just kind of jump right into the competitions and go for it. But for my academic world, sometimes I didn't really know, oftentimes I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. And that's kind of where I'm at right now too with my PhD. I gave a presentation a couple years ago at the Create conference where I talked about, when I went for my bachelor's degree, I didn't even know what a bachelor's degree was. I just dove on in and kind of went with it. When I went for my master's degree, I didn't know what a master's degree was. I was just kind of going and figuring it out as I was doing it. And now that I'm going for my PhD, it's the same thing. I know what I have to do, but I don't really know what's involved, what's going to come up, how it's going to work, what it's going to look like. I'm just diving on in, okay? So that's my Sensei Says this week, is just dive on in. Now, this might not work for everybody. Some people's personalities, they really need to plan it out and really kind of map out where they're going to go, where they're going to do this. But one thing that I think is really important about just diving on into something, whatever it is, athletic endeavors or not, diving on in, it's going to show you either you're going to sink or you're going to swim. Either you're going to perform or you're not. And it's not to either build up your ego or break you down or whatever, but it's going to show you that, okay, I'm good on this. Like, I'm prepared for this. I dove on in. I was freaked out, but I performed. So you're okay in that situation. Or on the other end, maybe you're not ready for it. Well, if you just dive on in, you're going to find out. But the beautiful, beautiful thing about this is sometimes you dive on in, you're not quite ready for it, but you figure it out. And I think that's really important. And that's what really comes from just diving on into something is you don't know what's coming. You don't know what to do, but you figure it out. You force your body to go from one thing to the next and figure out what you got to do basically to perform or to make your goal, to get your PhD or whatever the hell it is that you want to do. Whatever it is, sometimes I think the best approach is to just dive on in. So there it is. That's the Sensei Says of this week. All right, the final section that we have, the final segment that I have here on the show of the KFit show is we're going to be looking at Ask KFit. So Ask KFit is just a segment where I take questions from you guys, the listeners. I see you guys watching right now. Thank you very much. I do appreciate you very much for tuning into this episode of the Facebook Live. But if you ask me questions, send me a message or whatever on KFit Conditioning on Facebook, and I will answer them for you. This is what I'm doing this for, so I can help you answer questions that you have about exercise, about training, about how the body adapts, exercise physiology, exercise prescription, whatever it is. I want to be able to answer you because I've gotten all this knowledge over, 7+ years of academic world and going for my PhD and that kind of stuff that I want to share it. I want to help you guys. That's what I want to do. So that's what the Ask KFit segment is all about. So let's get right in. So this week I had a question come from me from Jeff Ross. He asked me, what supplements do I take? So he said, what supplements do you take? What supplements do I, Kalan, take? Great question, Jeff. What supplements do I take, performance or health-wise? If you guys haven't listened to it, I think it's episode 3 with the nutritionist Mateus Mistura. He breaks down which ones he thinks you should be taking. Now, I'm not obviously necessarily in nutrition. I do have a nutrition background. I think I'm quite knowledgeable in the subject. And the supplements that I take. So let's start with the health. There's kind of 2 different fields, health supplements and performance supplements. So for health supplements, I take omegas. I take your omega-3 fatty acids. I take it in just a pill form, and I load up on those. I take about, 2,500 milligrams of that, and that's a lot. But what the research has shown with omega-3s is that you can take a lot, and that, in fact, taking a lot sometimes can improve. your brain function. That's what kind of omegas does. It improves your brain function. It improves, your anti-inflammatory processes, so you're not going to get that inflammation so much in your joints. So if you have joint problems, so one of the first things they recommend you take is omega-3s. So fill your boots with omega-3s. Make sure it's pure omega-3. But yeah, I take that. I fill my boots with that. I also take vitamin D3. I usually don't take it in the summer because, here on the West Coast, we do get that sunshine throughout the summer, which gives us that vitamin D. But especially in the summer, I want to take vitamin D, and especially vitamin D3. Research has shown that that's kind of the vitamin D that you want. Just to help your immune system, to help your endorphins, and help your overall well-being, basically. But you also know that vitamin D should be consumed with calcium as well. So make sure you get enough calcium, or you're taking calcium. I don't take calcium specifically, but I get enough of it in my diet. But vitamin D3 is one I take. So omegas, vitamin D3. What else? I take magnesium supplement too. We get a lot of magnesium from leafy greens. I eat a lot of leafy greens, but magnesium really helps all our metabolic processes. So I'll eat those magnesium. And B vitamins. That's another one that I'm big on. We know B vitamins gives us that kind of energy. It kind of gets our blood flowing a little bit. It helps with our blood production. So B100 is what I take, which is just a combination of a bunch of different B vitamins. So I think that's pretty much it in terms of the health supplements. There's a lot of stuff out there that people will try and promote, but you don't necessarily need. One thing that I don't think you need, and this was agreed with the nutritionist on an earlier episode, is I don't think you need a multivitamin. I think multivitamins are convenient. Sure, you just take one and away you go, but they often give you more of stuff that you don't necessarily need. Like, for example, vitamin C is not a great example because you could fill your boots with vitamin C and it's still good for you. But there's often stuff in multivitamins that you just piss out, basically. You just urinate them out, and you don't even absorb them. So I think sometimes it's not necessary to take a multivitamin in terms of the health supplements. So there it is: omegas, magnesium, vitamin D. I take vitamin D in liquid form too, just for anybody that's asking. And B100. That's usually all I take. Sometimes I'll take a vitamin E as well if I'm feeling low on energy, and that's also because I don't get a lot of vitamin E from other things, but those are my health. In terms of the performance supplements, that's what everybody wants to know. What performance supplements do you take? Let's get into the nice meat and potatoes here. Well, I don't really take anything, actually, to be honest. Well, that's not true. I do take creatine. Sometimes. Creatine we've talked about before. We talked about it again with the nutritionist. It helps with that explosive movement. It is an energy source, creatine phosphate, and by taking exogenous creatine as a supplement, you're just getting more efficient or more likely to be able to use that fast energy system more efficiently and for a longer period of time. So when I'm in a heavy training cycle, I'll often take creatine. So yeah, I do take creatine, and sometimes I also put it on. Yeah, I take it to improve performance quite sometimes. With creatine, you want to make sure that you're cycling it, so you often want to do like 6 to 8 weeks, take about a week or two off, and then if you want to go back on again. For sport performance is great. For putting on size, I know that's what a lot of people ask. In fact, I know Jeff asked me about this specifically, putting on size with creatine. You will, once you've loaded it in your system and you've taken it for about a week or so, you will put on size naturally because you are using your fast twitch muscle fibers, which are bigger, and they're also going to draw in more water into your glycogen stores in your muscle, which just physically makes your muscles bigger. Doesn't necessarily make you stronger. It does. It makes your potential to be stronger greater, but it will put on a little bit of weight too. So, if you're somebody who's trying to put on weight, maybe creatine is something that you might want to look at, but do be careful. Make sure you drink a lot of water with it. Talk to me. In terms of performance supplements outside of that, I don't usually take protein. Sometimes I will take protein after a workout, BCAAs if I haven't eaten a lot of meat, or I don't think I've gotten a lot of protein in my diet. Branched chain amino acids I'll sometimes take. Research has shown that before and after is the best approach for doing BCAAs, but it's not really something that I think is necessary. One that I do recommend, I don't take it specifically, but one that I do recommend for some people who have that joint pain or who have trouble really recovering from a workout is glutamine. Glutamine is another amino acid, but it's one that works with your immune system to make you not so sore the next day or make you recover a little bit better. So if you're an elite athlete training almost every single day, sometimes glutamine is a good one too. But again, I don't usually take that myself. Sometimes I do. So There it is. Those are the supplements I take. So, Jeff, that hopefully answers your questions. I hope you tuned in. Thank you very much. And thank you guys for tuning in again to this episode of the KFit Show. I do appreciate it. Again, if you have questions, send them my way. KFit Conditioning by Kalan Anglos, kalananglos@gmail.com, or Kalan Anglos at all of the social media stuff. Follow along my journey, guys. I want to do this for you guys so I can answer your questions, help you guys perform, help you guys live a healthier lifestyle, because that's what I'm all about. All right, that wraps up this episode of the KFit Show, guys. Thank you very much. I hope you have a fantastic week. Don't forget, Saturday, August 26th, Mayweather versus McGregor. You better be watching it. The whole world will be watching. We'll talk about it next week on the KFit Show. And that's it. That's all I got. Thanks for tuning in, guys. We'll talk to you next week.